My Bangkok Nightmare, a story you need to share. From your subscriber, Erik. Hey there. I've been following Bangkok walking videos for months now, and they've been both a blessing and a curse for me. Every time I see those familiar streets, the street vendors, the neon lights of Khao San Road, my heart races with a mixture of nostalgia and terror. I need to share my story with you because I think it could help save others from the nightmare I lived through. You use real stories in your videos, and mine is as real as it gets. I'm Erik Andersson, 52 years old, originally from Växjö, Sweden. What happened to me in Bangkok between March of 2024 and September of 2024 nearly destroyed my life completely. But I survived. And now I want to warn others through your platform. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a carpenter by trade. Have been my whole life. In Växjö, I built a decent reputation restoring old Swedish houses, crafting furniture with my own hands, working with wood that told stories of generations past. My workshop was my sanctuary, filled with the scent of pine and oak, the familiar weight of tools worn smooth by decades of use. I had a modest house overlooking one of our many lakes, a loyal German shepherd named Max, who greeted me every evening with unconditional love, and what most would call a quiet, stable life. But stability can feel like a prison when you're 52 and wondering if this is all there is. The Swedish winters seem to grow longer each year, the darkness more oppressive. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. to pitch black skies, work all day under artificial lights, and come home to more darkness. The routine was suffocating me slowly, like being buried alive under layers of predictability. That's when Thailand started calling to me. Not literally, of course, but through every travel blog I read, every YouTube video I watched, every story I heard from friends who'd visited. The photos were intoxicating. Golden temples gleaming in tropical sunlight, bustling markets filled with exotic fruits and spices, beaches where the sands was white as fresh snow but warm under your feet. I read testimonials from expats who'd found love, purpose, and happiness in Bangkok and Chiang Mai. They spoke of a cost of living so low that a Swedish pension could make you feel wealthy, of a culture that welcomed foreigners with genuine warmth. I wasn't chasing some midlife crisis fantasy of becoming a beach bum or finding a young wife. I genuinely believed I could use my carpentry skills to help build something meaningful while experiencing a completely different way of life. The idea grew from a whisper to a roar in my mind. By late 2023, I was spending hours each night researching visa requirements, job opportunities, and housing options in Thailand. The decision, when it finally came, felt both terrifying and liberating. I would sell my workshop, arrange care for Max with my neighbor, a kind widow who'd always loved him, and book a one-way ticket to Bangkok. I gave myself a year, 12 months to either build a new life or return home with stories and experiences that would sustain me through whatever years remained. March 15th of 2024. That's a date burned into my memory forever. I remember standing in Arlanda Airport in Stockholm, my entire life condensed into 2 suitcases, and a tool bag. The weight of what I was doing hit me as I watched the Swedish countryside disappear below the clouds. There was no going back now. Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport was my first taste of sensory overload. The humidity hit me like walking into a sauna fully clothed. The sounds were overwhelming. Announcements in Thai, the chatter of 1,000 conversations, the constant hum of air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the tropical heat. The smells were equally intense. A mixture of jet fuel, street food, incense, and something indefinably exotic that I would later learn was the scent of Thailand itself. I took a taxi to Khao San Road, the legendary backpacker district I'd read about online. The driver spoke broken English but was friendly enough, pointing out landmarks and offering unsolicited advice about avoiding scams. I should have listened more carefully to that last part. My guest house was a narrow 3-story building squeezed between a tattoo parlor and a restaurant serving something called banana pancakes to homesick Western travelers. My room was tiny, barely larger than a closet, with a bed, a fan that sounded like a helicopter, and a bathroom so small I had to step into the shower to close the door. But it was clean, cheap at 800 baht per night, and right in the heart of the action. Those first few days were magical in their chaos. I wandered the streets like a child in a candy store, marveling at everything. The street food vendors with their mobile kitchens, cooking pad thai and som tam with theatrical flair. The tuk-tuk drivers who seemed to view traffic laws as mere suggestions. The temples that appeared like golden mirages between modern buildings, offering pockets of serenity in the urban madness. I found work within a week at a small furniture repair shop in Thonglor district. The owner, a Thai man named Somchai, spoke decent English and was impressed by my European craftsmanship techniques. The pay was modest, 15,000 baht per month, but enough to cover my basic expenses with some leftover for exploration. I was proud to be earning my keep, contributing something valuable to my new community. The expat community around Khao San Road was diverse and welcoming. There was James, a British teacher who'd been in Bangkok for 5 years. Maria, a German photographer documenting street art. And David, an American retiree who regaled us with stories of his adventures throughout Southeast Asia. We'd gather at a bar called The Hangover most evenings, sharing stories and advice over cheap Chang beer. But even in those early optimistic days, I noticed the undercurrent of danger that ran through Bangkok like a hidden river. Stories circulated constantly. Tourists getting drugged and robbed, visa scams, fake police checkpoints, romance cons that left men financially and emotionally devastated. I told myself I was too smart, too cautious to fall for such obvious traps. How wrong I was. Her name was Niran, and she appeared in my life like a character from a romantic movie. It was a Thursday evening in late April, and I was sitting alone in a rooftop bar in Silom, nursing a beer and watching the Bangkok skyline light up as darkness fell. The city looked beautiful from up there, a glittering maze of possibilities stretching to the horizon. She was working as a waitress, moving between tables with a grace that seemed to defy the chaos around her. When she approached my table, her smile was radiant, genuine in a way that cut through the artificial friendliness I'd grown accustomed to from service workers catering to tourists. We started talking, and I was immediately struck by her intelligence and curiosity. She asked about Sweden, about my work, about what had brought me to Thailand. Her English was good, peppered with charming grammatical quirks that made her even more endearing. Niran was 28, born in a small village in Isan province, but drawn to Bangkok by the same dreams of opportunity that had brought me halfway around the world. She'd been in the city for 3 years, working various jobs to support herself and send money back to her family. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of hope and weariness, that I recognized from my own mirror. Our first real date was magical. She took me to Wat Pho at dawn, before the tourists' crowds arrived. We walked through the temple grounds as monks in saffron robes went about their morning rituals, the air thick with incense and the sound of chanted prayers. She explained the significance of the Buddha statues, the history of the temple, the meaning behind the intricate murals that covered every surface. I felt like I was seeing Bangkok through new eyes, not as a tourist consuming experiences, but as someone being welcomed into a deeper understanding of the culture. Over the following weeks, Niran became my guide to the real Bangkok. She showed me night markets where locals shopped, street food stalls that served authentic regional dishes, jazz clubs where Thai musicians played until dawn. Through her, I met her friends, a tight-knit group of young Thais who worked in the service industry but dreamed of bigger things. They welcomed me with a warmth I hadn't expected, including me in their conversations, teaching me Thai phrases, laughing at my clumsy attempts to use chopsticks properly. I was falling in love, not just with Niran, but with the life she was showing me. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The routine that had suffocated me in Sweden was replaced by spontaneity and adventure. Every day brought new experiences, new challenges, new reasons to be grateful for the leap of faith I'd taken. But love, especially love in a foreign country, can make you blind to warning signs that would be obvious in other circumstances. Niran began asking for small favors: money for her mother's medical bills, help with her rent when work was slow, loans to cover unexpected expenses. Each request came with a story that tugged at my heartstrings and an explanation that seemed perfectly reasonable. I wanted to help, to be the kind of man who could provide security and support for the woman he loved. Looking back, I can see how carefully orchestrated it all was. The requests started small, 500 baht here, 1,000 there, amounts that seemed insignificant to someone earning Swedish wages, but they gradually increased, and the stories became more elaborate. Her brother needed surgery. Her family's rice farm was failing. She wanted to start a small business but needed capital. Each time, she promised to pay me back, and I believed her because I wanted to believe her. The red flags were there, but I ignored them all. When I suggested visiting her family in Isan, she always had a reason why it wasn't a good time. When I offered to help her find a better job, she deflected with charm and affection. When other expats warned me about romance scams, I dismissed them as cynical and jaded. I was different, I told myself. Niran was different. What we had was real. June in Bangkok is when the rainy season begins its earnest, and with it came the first real test of my resilience. The heat became oppressive, a living thing that pressed down on the city like a giant hand. The air was so thick with humidity that breathing felt like drowning, and then I got sick. It started with what I thought was just fatigue from the heat. I'd been working long hours at some chai's shop, and the combination of physical labor and tropical climate was taking its toll. But the exhaustion quickly escalated into something more sinister. Fever spiked through my body like lightning, leaving me shivering despite the heat. My joints ached as if I'd been beaten with hammers. A rash spread across my skin like a map of my suffering. The local clinic near my guest house was a far cry from Swedish healthcare. The waiting room was packed with people in various states of illness. The air conditioning struggled against the heat and humidity, and the smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask other, less pleasant odors. When I finally saw a doctor, his diagnosis was swift and terrifying: dengue fever. Very common in rainy season, he explained in accented English. Especially in Khao San area. Many mosquitoes, many people. You are lucky you come now. If you wait, could be very dangerous. The week I spent in Bangkok hospital was a blur of IV drops, blood tests, and mounting medical bills. The fever broke on the 4th day, but the weakness lingered for weeks afterward. More frightening than the physical symptoms was the psychological impact. I'd come to Thailand feeling invincible, ready to conquer new challenges. The dengue fever reminded me of how vulnerable I really was, how far from home and help I'd traveled. While I was recovering, another crisis was brewing. In my fevered state, I'd lost track of time and dates. When I finally checked my passport, I realized with horror that I'd overstayed my 60-day visa exemption by 5 days. In most countries, this might result in a fine or a stern warning. In Thailand, overstaying your visa is a serious offense that can result in detention, deportation, and a ban from re-entering the country. Panic set in. I couldn't afford to be deported. Not when I'd invested everything in this new life. Not when I was finally starting to build something meaningful. I needed help, and I needed it fast. That's when I made the first of several catastrophic decisions. Instead of going to the immigration office directly to explain my situation and pay the standard overstay fine, I listened to a fellow expat who recommended a visa agent who could fix everything quickly and quietly. The agent operated out of a small office in a nondescript building near Victory Monument. He was a middle-aged Thai man who spoke fluent English and exuded the kind of confidence that comes from years of dealing with desperate foreigners. He listened to my story with practiced sympathy, nodding at all the right moments and making reassuring sounds. "No problem," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Happen all the time. I fix you. Very easy. Just 5,000 baht. And you get proper extension. No questions. No problem." I should have known it was too good to be true. In Sweden, nothing involving government bureaucracy is ever very easy, or no question. But I was desperate, scared, and still weak from the dengue fever. I paid the money and received what looked like an official visa extension stamp in my passport. The relief was overwhelming. I was legal again, free to continue building my new life. The relief lasted exactly 3 weeks. The knock on my guest house door came at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late July. I was still groggy from sleep when I opened the door to find two uniformed immigration officers standing in the narrow hallway. They were polite, but firm, showing me an official-looking document in Thai and broken English. "Your visa extension is fake," one of them explained. "You must come with us now." The world tilted on its axis. The visa extension I'd paid 5,000 baht for was worthless. Worse than worthless, because using a fake document was a more serious crime than simply overstaying. I was allowed to pack a small bag before being escorted to a waiting van. The ride through Bangkok's morning traffic felt surreal, like watching a movie of someone else's life. Suan Plu Immigration Detention Center is a place that exists in the nightmares of every expat living in Thailand. From the outside, it looks like any other government building. Concrete walls, barred windows, guards at the gate. But inside, it's a different world entirely. A liminal space where people from dozens of countries wait in legal limbo for their cases to be resolved. The intake process was dehumanizing. I was photographed, fingerprinted, and searched. My belongings were catalogued and stored. I was given a number. I was no longer Erik Andersson, Swedish Carpenter. I was detainee number 4,847. The cell I was assigned to was designed for 8 people but held 12. The air was stifling, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and desperation. My cellmates were a United Nations of the desperate and unlucky. There was Ahmed, a Pakistani construction worker whose employer had confiscated his passport. Vladimir, a Russian tourist who'd been caught with a small amount of marijuana. Chen, a Chinese businessman accused of visa fraud. And Marcus, an American who'd been living illegally in Thailand for 3 years. Each had a story. Each had made choices that led them to this concrete purgatory. The days blended together in a haze of boredom, fear, and uncertainty. We woke at 6 a.m. to the sound of guards banging on cell doors. Breakfast was rice porridge with a few vegetables, barely enough to sustain life. We spent most of the day sitting on concrete floors, playing cards with a deck that was missing half its cards, or staring at the ceiling and wondering when our ordeal would end. The legal process was a labyrinth of bureaucracy and corruption. I was assigned a lawyer, a harried Thai woman who spoke limited English and seemed to be handling dozens of cases simultaneously. She explained that my options were limited: pay a substantial fine, accept deportation, and hope for the best. The fine was 50,000 baht, money I didn't have. The deportation would come with a 5-year ban from re-entering Thailand, effectively ending any hope of returning to the life I'd tried to build. 3 weeks passed like 3 years. I watched over detainees come and go, some paying their fines and walking free, others being escorted to the airport in handcuffs. The uncertainty was the worst part. Every morning I wondered if this would be the day my case was resolved, one way or another. The conditions were taking their toll on everyone. Men who'd entered as functioning adults were becoming hollow-eyed shells of themselves. Depression was endemic. Suicide attempts not uncommon. I found myself thinking about Max, about my workshop in Lekwa, about the life I'd abandoned in pursuit of something better. Had it all been a mistake? Was I paying the price for my hubris? While detained, I became aware of a shadow economy that operated parallel to the legitimate world I'd known. Whispered conversations in the detention center revealed a vast network of cybercriminals, document forgers, and scam artists who preyed on vulnerable foreigners like myself. The most chilling revelation came from a fellow detainee named Pavel, a Czech man who'd been arrested in connection with a passive online gambling operation. He told me about Fun586, a website that had been raided by Thai authorities just weeks before my arrest. The operation had processed millions of dollars in illegal bets, employed hundreds of people, and had tentacles reaching across Southeast Asia. "You think you understand Thailand," Pavel said during one of our late-night conversations. "But there is whole other world here. Cybercrime, money, laundering, document fraud. It's everywhere. And foreigners like us, we are perfect targets. We are desperate. We don't understand the system. And we have money." He explained how the scams worked. Visa agents like the one who'd sold me the fake extension were often connected to larger criminal networks. They'd identify vulnerable foreigners, sell them fake documents, then tip off authorities for a reward. It was a perfect system. They got paid twice for the same crime. The gambling sites were even more sophisticated. They'd recruit foreigners to work as customer service representatives, promising good salaries and legal work permits. Once the foreigners were in Thailand and dependent on their employers, they discovered they were actually working for illegal operations. By then, it was too late to leave. Their passports would be confiscated, and they'd be trapped in a cycle of criminality they'd never intended to join. I learned about romance scams that made my situation with Nidan look amateur by comparison. Organized groups would create fake profiles on dating sites, target lonely foreigners, and systematically drain their bank accounts over months or years. The women, and sometimes men, involved weren't necessarily criminals themselves. Many were victims of trafficking or coercion, forced to participate in schemes they couldn't escape. The more I learned, the more I realized how naive I'd been. I'd thought I was street smart, cautious, prepared for the obvious dangers of living abroad. But I'd been swimming in waters full of sharks, completely unaware of the predators circling beneath the surface. Desperation makes people do stupid things, and by August, I was desperate beyond measure. My lawyer had made it clear that my options were limited and expensive. I needed money for fines, legal fees, and basic survival. My savings were nearly exhausted, and I had no way to earn income while detained. That's when I made contact with someone who claimed he could solve all my problems. Through a contraband mobile phone that circulated among detainees, I accessed Facebook and found a group called Thailand Visa Solutions. The group was full of testimonials from foreigners who'd successfully resolved their immigration problems through unofficial channels. A man named Tony messaged me privately. His profile showed a middle-aged European man living in a comfortable life in Bangkok. Photos of expensive restaurants, luxury condos, and beautiful Thai women. He claimed to be a consultant who helped foreigners navigate Thailand's complex bureaucracy. "I can get you a European passport," he wrote, "completely legal, registered in EU database, 80,000 baht, and you walk free. No more visa problems, no more detention, no more worries." The offer was tempting beyond belief. A European passport would solve all my problems instantly. I could leave Thailand legally, return to Sweden, or even come back to Thailand later with a clean slate. The price was steep, but Tony assured me it was a one-time investment that would pay for itself many times over. Against every instinct I should have had, I agreed to the deal. Tony's instructions were specific. I needed to transfer 40,000 baht upfront, with the remaining 40,000 due upon delivery of the passport. He provided bank account details and assured me the document would be ready within a week. I managed to scrape together the money by selling my tools to another detainee and borrowing from Marcus, the American who'd become something of a friend. The transfer was made through a complex series of transactions designed to avoid detection by authorities. A week passed, then 2 weeks. Tony's responses to my increasingly frantic messages became evasive, then stopped altogether. When I finally managed to check his Facebook profile again, it had been deleted. The group where I'd found him had vanished as well. I'd been scammed again, this time for an amount that represented months of savings. The passport was never coming. Tony was probably not even his real name. I was trapped in detention with no money, no prospects, and no hope of escape. The psychological impact was devastating. I'd thought I'd hit rock bottom when I was arrested, but this was deeper. A level of despair I hadn't known existed. I'd been victimized not once, but multiple times. Each scam building on the vulnerability created by the previous one. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was a mark, a target, someone so desperate and gullible that criminals could exploit me with impunity. By September, I was a broken man. The combination of physical deterioration, psychological trauma, and financial ruin had reduced me to a shadow of my former self. I'd lost weight, my hair was falling out of stress. I'd developed a persistent cough that the detention center's medical staff couldn't or wouldn't treat properly. My case had stalled in the legal system. My lawyer rarely returned my calls, and when she did, it was only to demand more money for fees I couldn't afford. Other detainees came and went, but I remained, trapped in a bureaucratic maze with no clear exit. The worst part was the isolation. I'd been cut off from the outside world for months. I had no way to contact my friends or family in Sweden. No way to access my bank accounts. No way to manage the life I'd abandoned. For all I knew, my house had been repossessed, my belongings sold, my dog given away to strangers. One night in late September, I reached my breaking point. I was lying on the concrete floor of my cell, listening to the sounds of 12 men trying to sleep in a space meant for 8. When the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I was 52 years old, trapped in a foreign prison, with no money, no prospects, and no hope of escape. My dream of a new life in Thailand had become a nightmare that seemed to have no end. I thought about my father, who died when I was 30. He'd been a carpenter too. A man who'd built a modest but respectable life through hard work and careful planning. What would he think of his son now? I thought about Max, my loyal dog, who was probably wondering why his master had abandoned him. I thought about the workshop I'd sold, the life I'd thrown away in pursuit of something that had never been real. That night, I wrote a letter. A goodbye to the world. An explanation of how I'd ended up in this place. An apology to everyone I'd let down. I planned to find a way to end my suffering, to escape the only way that seemed possible. But as I was writing, I heard Nidan's voice in my memory, not a manipulative woman who'd helped lead me into this trap, but the person I thought she was during those magical early weeks. "Please live," she'd said once I'd mentioned feeling homesick. "Please be safe." The words had seemed like throwaway pleasantries at the time, but now they felt like a lifeline. I realized that ending my life wouldn't solve anything. It would only transfer my suffering to others. My family in Sweden would never know what had happened to me. Max would wait for an owner who would never return. The criminals who'd victimized me would continue their operations, finding new marks to exploit. I tore up the letter and made a different decision. I would survive this. I would find a way out. I would return to Sweden and rebuild my life, and I would use my experience to warn others about the dangers I had encountered. The breakthrough came in early October, not through my lawyer or the Thai legal system, but through the Swedish embassy. A new consular officer named Anna Lindström had been assigned to handle cases involving Swedish citizens in Thai detention. Unlike the previous officials I had dealt with, she seemed genuinely committed to helping her countrymen. Anna visited me in detention and listened to my story without judgment. She explained that while the embassy couldn't interfere with Thai legal proceedings, they could help facilitate my return to Sweden once my case was resolved. More importantly, she helped me understand my options and connect with resources I hadn't known existed. Through Anna's intervention, I was able to contact my bank in Sweden and access funds that had been frozen due to suspicious activity. The money transfers to Tony had triggered fraud alerts. With these funds, I was finally able to pay the fines and legal fees necessary to resolve my case. The process took another month of bureaucratic wrangling, but eventually I was released from detention with a deportation order and a 5-year ban from re-entering Thailand. I was escorted directly from the detention center to Suvarnabhumi airport, where I boarded a flight to Stockholm with nothing but the clothes on my back and a temporary travel document. My flight home was the longest 11 hours of my life. I was free, but I felt like a failure. I'd left Sweden with dreams of adventure and purpose, and I was returning as a deportee with no money, no possessions, and no prospects. The other passengers on the plane looked like normal people living normal lives. Exactly what I'd been trying to escape a year earlier. Landing in Stockholm felt surreal. The airport was clean, efficient, and familiar in a way that made me want to cry. Swedish voices sounded strange after months of hearing only Thai and broken English. The October air was crisp and cold, a sharp contrast to Bangkok's oppressive heat. I had nowhere to go. My house had been sold to pay debts. My belongings were in storage, and Max was living with my neighbor. I spent my first night back in Sweden in a homeless shelter, surrounded by people who'd fallen through society's cracks. I realized I was one of them now. The first months back in Sweden were perhaps harder than my time in detention. At least in Thailand, I'd had the excuse of being a victim of circumstances beyond my control. Back home, I had to face the reality of the choices I'd made and the consequences that followed. I moved into a small apartment provided by social services, a far cry from the house I'd once owned. The walls were thin, the heating inadequate, and the neighbors were a mixture of refugees, addicts, and other people who'd fallen on hard times. But it was safe, legal, and mine. Finding work was challenging. My reputation in the local carpentry community had been damaged by my sudden departure and the rumors that followed. Some people thought I'd fled to avoid debts. Others assumed I'd been involved in something criminal. The truth that I'd been scammed and detained in Thailand sounded almost as bad. I eventually found part-time work with a construction company that specialized in renovating old buildings. The pay was low, the work was physically demanding, and my colleagues treated me with suspicion. But it was honest work, and it gave me a sense of purpose I'd been missing. The psychological recovery was slower than the financial one. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and PTSD. Dr. Eriksson helped me understand that What I'd experienced wasn't just bad luck, it was a systematic victimization that left deep psychological scars. You were targeted, she explained during one of our sessions. These weren't random crimes or coincidences. You were identified as a vulnerable person and exploited by people who make their living from others' desperation. The therapy helped me understand that my experience wasn't unique. Thousands of foreigners fall victim to similar scams every year in Thailand and other countries. The shame I felt wasn't justified. I'd been the victim of sophisticated criminals who knew exactly how to exploit the hopes and dreams of people like me. As I write this in June of 2025, nearly a year has passed since my return to Sweden. I've managed to rebuild some semblance of a normal life. I have a steady work, a small but comfortable apartment, and I've been reunited with Max, who's now 14 and showing his age but still greets me with the same enthusiasm he always has. I've also started speaking publicly about my experience. I give talks at community centers, write blog posts, and participate in online forums where people discuss the realities of expat life in Southeast Asia. The response has been overwhelming. Dozens of people have contacted me with similar stories, and several have said my warnings helped them avoid similar traps. The most difficult part of sharing my story has been confronting the role I played in my own victimization. I wasn't just unlucky. I made a series of poor decisions based on wishful thinking and willful ignorance of obvious warning signs. I ignored advice from experienced expats, dismissed red flags in my relationship with Niran, and trusted criminals because I wanted to believe their lies. But I've also learned that victim blaming, even self-imposed, isn't productive. The people who scammed me were professionals who'd perfected their techniques on hundreds of previous victims. They knew exactly which psychological buttons to push, which vulnerabilities to exploit, and which lies would be most convincing. My experience is part of a larger pattern of exploitation that affects thousands of foreigners in Thailand and other popular expat destinations. The combination of cultural differences, language barriers, legal complexities, and economic desperation creates perfect conditions for criminal enterprises to flourish. The Thai government has made efforts to crack down on these operations, but the problem is systematic and deeply rooted. Corruption in law enforcement, inadequate resources for investigating complex crimes, and the constant influx of new potential victims make it difficult to eliminate these networks entirely. The rise of digital technology has made the problem worse. Social media platforms, encrypted messaging apps, and cryptocurrency transactions has given criminals new tools to find victims, coordinate operations, and launder money. The Facebook passport scam that victimized me would have been impossible 20 years ago, but today it's just one of dozens of similar schemes operating across multiple platforms. If my story serves any purpose, I hope it's to help others avoid the mistakes I made. Here are the key lessons I've learned. Research everything extensively. Don't rely on blog posts, YouTube videos, or testimonials from strangers. Consult official government sources. Speak with multiple independent experts and verify every piece of information you receive. Never trust visa agents or fixers. If someone claims they can solve your legal problems quickly and quietly, they're almost certainly running a scam. Go through official channels, even if it's more expensive and time-consuming. Be extremely cautious about romantic relationships. This doesn't mean you should avoid dating locals, but be aware that romance scams are common and sophisticated. Take relationships slowly. Meet family and friends. And never send money to someone you've known for less than a year. Maintain emergency funds and exit strategies. Always have enough money to buy a plane ticket home. and make sure you have access to those funds even if your primary accounts are compromised. Stay connected with home. Don't burn bridges or cut ties with your support network. You may need help from family, friends, or government officials if things go wrong. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags because you want to believe in a dream. Understand the legal system. Learn about visa requirements, local laws, and your rights as a foreigner. Ignorance isn't a defense, and it makes you an easy target for criminals. Despite everything I've been through, I don't regret taking the leap to Thailand. The experience, as traumatic as it was, taught me valuable lessons about resilience, human nature, and my own capabilities. I discovered that I could survive things I never thought possible, and I found strength I didn't know I possessed. I also don't want to discourage others from pursuing their dreams of living abroad. Millions of foreigners live happily and successfully in Thailand and other countries around the world. The key is to approach such ventures with realistic expectations, thorough preparation, and constant vigilance. My story is a cautionary tale, but it's also a story of survival and redemption. I fell into a trap that could have destroyed me completely, but I found a way out. I lost almost everything, but I'm rebuilding. I was victimized by criminals, but I'm using my experience to help others avoid the same fate. If you're considering a major life change like moving abroad, please learn from my mistakes. Do your research, trust your instincts, and always have a backup plan. Dreams are worth pursuing, but they're not worth dying for. And if you're currently trapped in a situation similar to mine, please don't give up hope. There are people who can help, resources available, and ways out of even the darkest circumstances. Reach out to your embassy, contact local authorities, and don't be ashamed to ask for help. Most importantly, remember that your life has value beyond any mistake you've made or any situation you've found yourself in. I came very close to ending my life in that detention center, and I'm grateful every day that I chose to keep fighting instead. Thailand is a beautiful country with wonderful people and amazing opportunities, but it's also a place where dreams can become nightmares if you're not careful. My hope is that by sharing my story, I can help others navigate those waters more safely than I did. Stay safe out there, and remember, no dream is worth your life. Erik Andersson, Växjö, Sweden, June 2025. P.S. I hope this story serves your channel well. I know your walking videos show the beauty of Bangkok, but I think it's important for people to understand the full picture. If sharing my experiences can save even one person from going through what I did, then every moment of pain was worth it. Feel free to use this however you think will help the most people. Keep up the great work with your channel. Those streets hold so many stories, some beautiful, some tragic, all human. Best regards, Erik.